Okay, so we're back after a bit of a break, which was kind of unplanned. I had started putting out the mask videos before I'd finished the whole thing, and I started doing the water, and I was getting some shuddering in my animation, and I couldn't quite figure out why, since I had done it before without any problems. So I went back to look at the material, and I did optimize it somewhat, so I'm happy I did it. But what I noticed ultimately ended up being the video card, so it really wasn't a problem so much as I noticed that these um, these grunge noises that we used for Rocks 1 and for the Stratified Rock are actually pretty expensive. And the reason is that they've got a lot of functionality that we're really not using, and it's probably not, from an optimization standpoint, it's actually a pretty easy noise to make on your own. And I was gonna have a separate demo on just doing noises, but I think it's worth redoing this one in the Stratified Rocks. It'll kind of give an introduction on how to do your own thing. Um, I mean, that's a lot of milliseconds for like some black and white dots that we're using for land masses. You can always see how these were made by opening the reference. Now, unless if you've written it yourself, you can go ahead and edit it, but this will give you a read-only file. This is a lot of work. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I love this texture, but for what we're using it for, uh, we're not adjusting any of these uh, outputs. It's a very complicated map for what we're using it for. So um, I thought that we could make our own, and I actually ended up, once I fixed my video card, this worked fine. It's not like I was having a problem using it, um, but I actually ended up liking the result of the map that I had made myself better, as far like from an artistic point of view. And it's really simple, and it sort of begins to introduce the concept of making your own noises. So what all we're going to do for this Rocks 1 is we are literally going to replace this with a homemade one, which will be a lot more efficient, and it will give us pretty much the same effect. Okay, so how do we make our own noise? Um, One of my favorites is the shape node. Now, shape node is great. You can have a selection here of a variety of shapes. So we have a square, which is just like a white square. So let's take a look at what, let's just, for now, we'll just blend these on top of, actually, no, we're gonna warp it. So why don't we just put it into our warp? Um, so this is just, like a square. But you have selection of other shapes. You have disc, so that's a very black and white, and you also have things that begin to have a grayscale to them. So these are different kinds of, they give you different shapes. So it's a Gaussian, thorn. Um, you got a wide variety to choose from. What you can also do here is determine the scale of your actual shape. You can change the X and Y values of your shape, and you can change the angle at which your shape appears, the default of your shape appears. So I don't know, I can't tell from my notes, it's just a picture, but I used one of these round ones. I think I used a Gaussian, and I made the scale pretty big. So, you know, I think I used, yeah, I think it was the default. Anyway, you can fool around with that. What we're going to do next, as you could imagine, is we're going to warp this by something. So we're going to take this very even shape, because eventually I want to end up with something like this. So these are not perfectly round, so we got to do something about that. So we're going to warp this shape by, I'm just going to get a purlin noise, and I'm going to use this as my warp. Oop, no, that's what I want. Okay, so let's take a look at that. It's set very low, so we can now sort of fool around with the intensity. Give myself a, that's 20 is going to be way too much. Why not? I mean, I had it set down to, I don't know, something along these lines. Down here. Like that. So now you've got something that looks sort of more oddly organic. Right, but this is just one thing. And what we're looking for is a whole bunch of different things of different sizes. There's something in here called the Splatter Map. Now you have different kinds of splatters, and it's fun to fool around with all of them. We're just going to use ye old Splatter Map, and we're going to plunk this guy in there. And this now gives us, let's take a look, this sort of very even, each one of these little guys here is this little guy here. But that's not really working for us yet. Anyway, however, there's plenty of functionality in here that we can go through. Okay, so you have your pattern size width again, so you can make them oblong instead of round. You can, again, you can rotate them. You can rotate variation, which is nice. So you can have, you know, like they will rotate at different rates. I mean, if you have this set down to 0, they're going to do everything. They're all exactly the same. If you set this, and then you're going to start getting variety in there. Now you also have zoom, so you can make them bigger or smaller. You can change their gain, so you can, I made them more, you know, I want a lot of white in here. I don't want a lot of gray, I want a lot of white, so we've got mostly white with some variation. And here's the magic part. We've got disorder. So now, if we set this disorder all the way up, we're starting to get, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to lower that. So we're starting to get some things happening in here. Now, the other thing that you need to do is you want your disorder random, because right now it's set. I mean, you notice how it's disordered, but they're still getting disordered along these horizontal lines, more or less. If you wanted to go completely crazy, you do that, and it will now, the disorder is now random. So now it's just a question of getting a big, you know, really scale up that size variation. Why is this not? I wanted to do more. Oh, you know what I did? Let's just fool around. I don't think we messed around with these pan X, pan Y business. So I'm going to move this around a little bit. My disorder's all the way up. I think I stretched this out a little bit. I want my patterns just a little bit bigger. So again, you know, you can get this to something approximating the big. So we're going to go for some bigger chunks and some smaller chunks. So I'm looking right now at my smaller chunks. These are looking kind of even. I don't like that. What can I do about that? No. I think, oh, okay, well, disorder. Disorder angle, I don't think. Yeah, there we go. That's what we missed. So yeah, so get it really random. And then we're going to basically make another one of these. I'm just going to copy it and paste it. And I just want it, different and smaller. So I'm going to, disorder angle will probably keep the same. I just want to get these little guys looking a little bit different, maybe a little longer. We can always change the zoom. And maybe make them a little bit bigger. Okay. And then it's just a question of blending them up using a lighten blend. And then adjusting to, I think I want these underlying ones. I think I want their size a bit closer to each other, and I think I want to do that by making these guys bigger. So I just single clicked on that, and I'm gonna bring the zoom up a little bit. And so this is now given me a very similar map to this map after we had run the levels. I liked it better, this chunkier style, but again, this is purely to suit. And you can always, again, if you want this to be, you can always expose any one of these parameters in here by, it's just like creating any other thing. You can expose whatever you want to expose. I'm now just going to replace this with this. Oh, you know what? No, I didn't do that. I think I just want to check. No, you know what? I actually got rid of this step too, because this is the first one that we have that's got our variables in it. So what I ended up doing, since we ended up, because like I think I mentioned this, if I think I might end up putting a exposing a parameter, I'll end up using a pixel processor. Otherwise, I'll tend to use like transform 2Ds. But in this particular case, what we ended up doing was, because we used the two splatter modes here, and we kind of made what we wanted to happen by doubling up this one, we can just completely bypass that step. So we've actually really made this material a lot more efficient. And we replaced this map here that is reading currently at 152 milliseconds with, if you add all these up, I really suck at math, but that's a number much less than 152. I don't know, something like 5 or 6 or whatever it ends up being. Again, if you don't feel like redoing this, don't. It should work just fine with the grunge map, but since I ended up doing this anyway, and I ended up liking the result better, I'm going to use this one, but you feel free to, because the rest of the material won't change. It's really the map. This mask will work the same, as will we're going to change another one. We're going to change that Stratified Rock Map, which is also very big. Let's save this. and the stratified rocks. Again, this one, this material here, and this grunge map is really big. There's so much stuff in here, and we're using like none of it. So again, I made a much simpler, I think I even made it lower res, because what we ended up, you know, you can use the more complicated one and it'll work fine. But again, this is an example of creating a more efficient map. So and it teaches you how to make your own noises too. So again, you're learning something new. So with this one, again, we're going to go for a shape. And this is the stratified rock now. So what I'm trying to do is basically recreate what's going on here. Let's see. We want the library. We're not going to need a splatter. We want our shape. And this time I'm going to choose something called waves. Bring this up. Which is going to give you some nice stripes. But it gives them in a circle, which I don't like. So I want to try to get this as close to having it to the edges as possible. So, well, first I'm going to bring that in. The scale I'm going to bring up. Oops, that's too big. So I'm kind of bringing it out to making sure that, you know, it's all up in the edges. I don't want that round sort of template that came with, so I'm just making it fall out beyond the edges of our plane here. Now I'm going to get a transform 2D. Let's make this. And I'm going to get them narrower. Oh, what am I doing? This is easier. So get these guys pretty confined in there. That looks pretty good. Again, you can, I want some clean whites in there, but I'd like to have it pretty tight. And then let's bring in directional warp. And we're going to plug that in there. And then I went into my library and I looked for a cheap but nice warp shape. Again, you know, you know, you can pull them out and you can see what they're made of. And this one, if we open the reference, you know, it's not enormous. It's a decently sized thing. It's not going to cost the bank as far as processing goes, and it's going to do the job. So we're going to plug that in as our warp, and what that's going to do for us is I'm going to lower this down a little bit. That's going to kind of wiggle them up a little bit, because one of the things about this is that they're not really entirely straight. So these are entirely straight, and I just kind of wanted to make them be a little bit more, you know, wiggly. And this looks pretty close to this one. And I decided to, I think I only used 2 of them. So we kind of took it down a notch as far as the amount of upscaling that we did. We can always add in, but let's do that. And we end up pretty much, we could probably make this a little bit wider. And we end up with something very close to what we had when we started. You know, I noticed when I did this, when I was actually looking at these, that I think that we didn't expose this guy here. The first directional warp I just want to double check, I believe is warp 1. I just click that, yeah. So we can, you may have done this, I didn't do it, so I'm going to call that one Strat Warp 1. I think we can make that not 0. So Strat Warp 1, well, we want that a bigger number, so let's make that a 10, and let's make, oh no, let's see what our default is. Start with 3. No, we want more than that. So there we go. And again, that's an exposed parameter. So this is going to, between these two warps, we're going to get, it seems a bit munched now, so let's take a look at warp 2. We're going to bring that down a bit. Yeah, I'm going to leave that 0.5. I think that one we wanted really low. There. Okay, we can always fool around with that. And that's that. The rest of it stays the same. So what we've done, again, we've replaced this gigantic, I think we read it, yeah, this giant thing with these 4 nodes. So that's the first step in optimization, is, you know, not having something enormous if you don't really need it. And that was kind of my bad, but I'm kind of glad I figured it out. Again, you don't have to do these. You can leave them exactly the same way that you have them from the previous demos, and it should work just fine for you. And then I'm going to stop this particular video, and we will continue with actually making our shoreline here.